Hello, hello! Welcome back to another picture of Hekapoo, I think. I think that I have another video of me actually drawing her on this channel, although it's hard to remember. Even if I do, if it's the one that I think that it is, I didn't like that drawing anyways. It's really over-rendered. Plus, it's a much older kind of drawing for me. Whereas this one's going to be focusing more on my sort of newly evolving exterior line strength sort of style that I've been going with lately. So I wanted to focus mainly on that. So to that end, I already have a draft of Hekapoo laid out for you. And if you wanted to watch me arduously craft Hekapoo's posterior, then well, too bad for you. Too bad for you. But for the sake of this video, I wanted to focus exclusively on this. The prior video was me talking about drafting in general, which is kind of funny because I ended up with no drawing at the end of that video, which is sort of the point, but, you know, still pretty funny. The focus of this video, of course, is going to be on line work, so this is why I'm starting here. Now, I sort of started out with this one because someone posted this in some thread somewhere, and it's an older drawing of mine, and of course they were talking about how much they love beating one out to this picture or whatever it is people do, and I'm like, gross. But then I was like, you know what, I kind of enjoyed drawing that picture and I sort of vaguely remember it. It'd be fun to draw Hekapoo again, so here we are. Here we are. Alright. Now, some things to get out of the way first. Resolution I'm working at currently is going to be a 92080 sort of, or 1920, sorry, 1920 desktop image. So right now I'm working at 4920 by 2767. And whenever you reduce the spec down to 1920, you get 1080 as far as the height goes. So whenever we export, the ratio should be the same. Although sometimes if you work at a particularly odd number, it will reduce down to something like 1920 1079 or something weird. So sort of be careful about that, because you don't want to have like one pixel that's empty at the top of your image or something of that nature. Okay, so I mentioned that because this is going to be our primary. Normally, whenever I work over an image, it's a pretty small brush size. Right now, like, typically I would work at something like a 14, or I think this is actually the one that I was working at last time, 14. But since we're working at such a much larger image, and by the way, even though we've already done our draft, since you're redrawing the image, be sure that you keep flipping your canvas. Like, it doesn't matter how many drafts that you're through with and how comfortable you are with the image, keep flipping the canvas because you will make mistakes. That's just the nature of drawing in general. But since we're working with such a big image, you should move up in your brush size, unless of course your objective is to get as macro as possible or as detailed as possible. But that's not how I've been working. I shouldn't actually have to move up too much. You don't want to get... Like, one of the reasons why I prefer not to work too large is because the bigger that you get on your brush size, and you can notice here, then the more of this sort of bleeding that you're going to get, where it fades. Maybe if I skip ahead like that. So what you can actually do is, if it really matters a lot, which it shouldn't at this resolution, then you can actually do your main line work and then go back over later on and sort of touch up anything by dropping back down to a proper size and just sort of doing a little bit of work like that. And that should fix up everything. So that's the reason I typically don't like working at this particular size. But I'm trying to keep this little intro brief, and we'll skip ahead as far as doing a time-lapse goes, of course. But for the time being, what I really wanted to focus on, I'm just going to get Reverend Nose there. What I really wanted to focus on is basically getting you to recognize as I draw it in the time-lapse, and I'll probably get rid of all this. I just wanted to get something out as quickly as possible. Something that I wanted you to recognize is the amount of strength that I'm putting on certain areas as I work, and why I'm doing it. And this is not a right-wrong thing, this is just my style, my personal style. This is more just me trying to get you to recognize what's going on as I'm drawing. That way you can at least follow along and decide, I don't like what he's doing here. And you'll have a reason for not liking what I'm doing there, wherever that there happens to be. Alright, so let's say that her hair is right here, blah, blah, blah. Alright. The particular style that I'm working with right now is a lot of heavy exterior line work, in addition to some sort of looser interior line work, with some recent things I've been doing. Here's a Peach image that I did fairly recently. This is what I'm this is what I'm talking about. You notice on the interior, the line work is fairly thin. As I get more detailed, it's a little bit lighter in stroke. But as I get further out, and also as I get further in to areas where sort of indentions are meeting indentions, the line work gets much heavier. And it goes for exterior as well. As I mentioned in the past, normally I would do much earlier in my career, I would actually have very loose, thin exterior lines so that I could go back over it and do lighting passes, which essentially is me erasing parts of the line work, and it ended up, just erasing it like that, so that the light source blends with whatever it is that it's hitting. And you definitely can do that, but that's not sort of how I'm working these days. I instead have been doing this. And I've been doing that just because I like the look of it. There's no right or wrong here, I just like the look of it. And also I drew this cat. I drew that cat. Actually, the cat's a much better example, because look at the exterior. Like, never mind that, its giant ass. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like normally. This is its design in real. This is a Digimon, Black Gatomon, I think. This is what it doesn't wear clothing. It's a cat, except for its little things here. This is completely canon. There's nothing wrong with this. Okay, all right. Just throwing that out there. But you can see here that the exterior is very thick in this case. Very thick. And it's also fairly angular. I've been doing this too. Where sort of the interior, if you look at it as if you look at it sort of like this, like you imagine all this is just being nothing and this is the actual form, then you notice that this is a bit more curved, whereas this is more of a container that I'm drawing around it. So these sort of container lines are something that I've been focusing a lot on. Also, like here where the rump meets the tail, you notice that the exterior is not as thick, but it still is somewhat thick. And it sort of thickens out here as it meets sort of the air, as it were. So anything that is sort of interior to the container thins out. But the closer it is to the exterior, then the more that you sort of notice that it sort of comes out. Like it doesn't... It's not thin and then right here it's absolutely massive. I'll do something like this. And just have it sort of blend in as far as the general width and breadth of the line goes. So those are the sorts of decisions that I've been making in regards to applying my line work. So see here we have uniform line thickness. So whenever I do my primary pass and I sort of get all my line work down, I will then go back through and sort of do a pass like this, where the line work gets much, much thicker. And you notice like right here, the closer it gets to a corner, the thicker both of them become. Because sort of the idea is, in real life, if two sort of corners mix together, then naturally it's going to form more of a darker space anyways. Because there's less area for light to reflect. If you were shading it, then that would happen the same way. But since I'm doing this exterior pass, I've noticed that doing it this way really helps make the general form that I'm applying pop. And I'll do the same here. Like, since this is so thick over here, I'm causing this to sort of furrow out so that it meets and blends. That's how I've been applying line work recently. So whenever I finally get done with the entire image, it'll look something like that. All the general rules that I've been applying will sort of converge. Let's draw our butt real fast. Draw our butt. Did I ruin it for you? Yes. No. I think that's my... I can't even remember where that's from now. I think Aaron voiced that one. Anyways. I hope Aaron and Dan enjoyed my Sonic cartoon that I did. I still don't know if they've ever seen it or not. Not that disconcerting. But it'd be nice if they saw it. Then again, I've seen people tell them, hey, have you seen this? Like on Twitter, tagging me. So, I don't know, maybe they hate me. Maybe they hate me. Maybe they hate poor play. I'm kidding. Alright, I was buying myself time. Alright. So, I'm sort of doing the same thing here. Let's see, her gigantic butt crack here is going to come down as well. So it'll be sort of like this. So it'll be a lot of dark exterior area. And you notice here that since this is still within her sort of container area, like her butt over here is going to be absolutely massive as far as the exterior line work goes. It'll be sort of like that. But because this is still internal, then the line work will be thinner than it will be externally. But it will still have the same rules. So, you know, thick, sort of shadowed area that thins out as it would if you were using paint. But the closer it becomes to those areas, then the thicker it's going to become. So, you get the idea. Alright. So, those are the rules that I'm going to be applying as I draw. So, look for that whenever I'm doing it. Alright, intro over. Everyone go back to doing stuff with my pictures as you listen to my voice in the future, and I think about drawing more cats that are totally canon, and there's nothing wrong with that. Alright, goodbye! Welcome back, me. Thanks, dipshit. Alright, I say that because some stuff happened. Some stuff really happened. About halfway through this drawing. Oh boy, did it ever. But we'll get to that, I guess. Okay. I think that it's been like 2 days since I recorded that first part, so I think I remember what I was saying. Something about, look for line thickness and variations and blah blah blah, or something. Let me tell you guys the secret. I don't know what I'm talking about half the time. The other half of the time, I mistakenly know what I'm talking about. The other half of the time, I do know what I'm talking about. So, make sense of that if you dare. Okay. In regards to this picture, it turned out alright. I'll give you guys some spoilers on that one. I've actually already uploaded it to DeviantArt and Tumblr, as it were. And it's gone over alright, but point being, you probably have already seen it one way or the other, so it doesn't really matter too much, does it? No. But Hekapoo here... Hekapoo gave me some troubles, and the troubles began... By the way, Tumblr, while I'm thinking about it, Tumblr recently made it impossible to track down the raw files of images that have been hosted there. Used to, you could just change the last few numerical values. Like if the file name is like 1280 for whatever the resolution is, you could change it to raw, and it would just output the raw file that the user originally uploaded. So you could download it that way. But they recently have made it so that you can't do that. You get an access denied sort of problem. So as a result, you can't really use it for hosting anymore. Because Tumblr apparently is run by jackasses, and they really don't want to answer any questions about it, and they didn't even mention that they did it in the first place. I imagine it's the thing where they discovered people were using the filter, like scripts to be able to load raw images natively whenever you scroll through the dashboard. That was probably causing some hosting issues, I imagine, if I had to guess. Either that or people started bitching about their Patreons or something like that, where they don't want the original files to be able to be downloaded. But you could anyways, something like that. That's maybe something else. They didn't say anything, so there's no way of knowing. So, point being, if you ever want to download something that is in the original file size that I intended, you can't do it through Tumblr. But if you do discover an image on my Tumblr that you want, usually, this is not always the case, but usually, especially on pictures like this, which is hosted on my DeviantArt, you can just click the little button that says source. Like, I usually set a source, and it's almost always my DeviantArt page. And it will just take you directly to the actual file. So, for anyone that is wondering about any of that, hate to waste time on a video talking about it, but it is what it is. There you go, you can do it that way. What a marvelous adventure that was. Alright. Hekapoo. Hekapoo, for the most part, was alright. There wasn't too many of the troubles to worry too much about. It mainly came from the... well, we'll get to it in a bit. But it mainly came from her hair. And her hair was a nightmare. Really, as far as the line strength and everything like that, almost exclusively the hair, I would say. Everything else is more or less okay. But her other horn gave me some trouble, too. It seems like I changed the primary in between whenever the video ended, the first part, and when the this time-lapse began. It seems like I did alter a few things. And I believe the hair, I altered the hair a little bit, and I altered the position of the horn. The position of the horn, I couldn't quite get the way that I wanted it to. It took me quite a while, but I ended up sticking with this one. I had to redraw it, draw a draft upon draft, and I just did that like 6 or 7 times before I came up with the one that I actually wanted. Because the problem that I was running into was, you see how both of her horns are curled in like they are? It's kind of, I usually think of these as being lich horns. Something like that. There's probably some sort of weird African goat thing that probably has horns like that, but whatever. Point being, they're weird-looking, curvy horns that go up and in. Like, stereotypical Viking horns, even though Vikings never actually wore helmets like that. And I did that just because I wanted her horns away from her ass. You see how her ass is, like, right there? She's got, like, an ass and it's there on the screen? Yeah, if her horns were the way that they're supposed to be, her ass wouldn't be there. That would be a horn. And we don't want that, do we? No. Cannot have that. So, to that end, I decided, you know what? These horns are gonna change. These horns are gonna change for the better, because we need that ass in focus. Because let's face it, Hekapoo is not actually a person, she's a sexual object. Oh, I shouldn't say... That's not even really a joke, that's just me being mean, unnecessarily. But of course she is a character, and I'll get a little bit more to a character later on. Which I've actually already discussed, I suppose, if I've done another art gripe on the matter. So, I suppose I don't have too much to talk about in regards to Star, specifically. Some things have changed in the course of events as far as the canonicity of events goes within the cartoon itself, so there's a little bit to talk about in regards to that. But anyways, later. Point being, horns. The horns were a problem because they needed to be curved inward like that. And horns, you should try it sometime. If you're a drawer, if you draw, not even for a living, just draw in general. Just real quick, just try to draw horns like that. Like, just do a little head, try to draw horns that, even like ones that go straight out to the side. Like if you're doing like a 3/4 thing downward sort of point of view or whatever, like I'm doing here. Just try it. Try to draw the horns sticking straight out. It is surprisingly challenging, especially whenever there is a minute curve to the horns. If it's any object, it can be a helmet or something. Just anything that involves extremely stylized objects that are curving or swirling around the head, mostly, I suppose, would be the main thing. It becomes a problem very quickly. And it becomes a problem very quickly because it's kind of hard to imagine what they look like in that regards. There are certain angles where it's easier than others. But with her, the main one that you see on the forefront, I can't say on what side or the other because I'm flipping so insanely fast. That one was more or less okay, because that was the one that I knew I can't obstruct the rest of her body, so I have to have it sort of pointed up the way that it is. So there's only one choice in regards to what I could do with that horn, so that one was okay. Trying to match the other one was the main problem. And I started thinking, well, wait, actually, here's my line of thought. In regards to everything in the picture, I was trying to make sure that all of it... Because one of the main things about this picture was not only just showing off the lines and everything, but I was also trying to get myself to draw in a way that I'm slightly not comfortable drawing. I was trying to do something that was more of a perspective shot, that was more about layout. And so you'll see, like, the ambiguous curtains in the background, for example. I was trying to make sure that everything was sort of directing itself towards the center of the screen. Or towards her face, at least. Or her butt. Her big old butt. I don't mind that. So I was trying to ensure that everything had a focus, like as far as tracking the line work of the page goes. All of it was being directed into a certain location, that sort of thing. So with her horn, if it was going straight out, then that would have been sort of a problem. I was trying to make it to where I was trying to cheat a little bit. Like, you can do... This is the thing about illustration or anything like that. Is you're not drawing a photograph. You don't have to really abide by real life. And that's the advantage of it, is that you can cheat sometimes. And if you can cheat most of the time. Like that stupid picture that caused a dumb Twitter uproar. The Spider-Woman picture where she's bent over and her butt's sticking out. You know, that stupid thing. That was a cheat picture. Like, the way that she was reclined over makes no sense at all. But you don't really notice it unless you're, like, someone that's angry about the picture sexualizing her and you start looking for it, right? Like, that picture was around for quite a while before anyone bothered to actually notice it. You can cheat a lot in images, and most people are never going to notice, and because you're not really supposed to notice. It's an illustration. If it was overly realistic, then it would be much easier to notice. And by the way, you notice right here, this little loopy I'm doing, this draft. I went to war with this little loopy of hair for a long, long time. It was such a problem because I kept over-detailing it because it's hair. And it was also behind the little hair dealy thing that comes down. Not her... What do you call those? Female sideburns. It's not actually sideburns, they're just little things of hair that come down. They're super cute, I love it whenever designs have them. But I have no idea what to call them. But point being, she has one of those on both sides, of course. And that little loopy thing is getting in the way. And that resolves itself by the end. But if you're wondering, why is he spending so much time on this? That's why. Like, right now, I have... At this point of the drawing, I'm thinking about, it's so over-detailed. I need to get rid of some of these lines. It is destroying the page. I can't have this. So that's what that is. But anyways, yeah, point being, you can cheat a lot on the page, and not many people are going to notice it, and even if they do, it's not a big deal. The advantage of doing a drawing is that you don't have to be perfect. Even whenever you finally finish the picture, there are lots of times where, you know, I get like a minor perspective thing wrong. Like even this picture. If you really think about it, the way that she's bent over, the way that her chest looks in regards to the rest of her body, it's not perfect. Like, it doesn't really make that much sense. If she were to stand up and she kept, like, if she was a 3D model and she kept all that, the way that it is exactly, then she'd probably look like a freak of nature. Not like a good freak of nature, like, you know, like a Steiner freak of nature or anything like that. No, not the good kind. The good kind? Is he really the good kind? Well, he's good enough. She would look like an abomination against the Lord. Jesus would be sad to see her. Jesus would be... He's probably sad about a lot of things, to be honest, especially my videos. But point being, it wouldn't be good. And that's because I'm cheating. I'm cheating because I'm like, hey, here's Hekapoo. She's sexy. Look at her butt, look at her chest, and look at her pretty face. She's got it all. She's got it all. And that's the end of it. So I cheat on the page, and then you get the results. Good for you. So, that one horn on the side, I was trying to cheat with it, but the thing about that is that it's such an exaggerated shape, and it's such a specific sort of shape, that it kept not coming out right, so it just took forever to be able to lay it out correctly. What I ended up having to do is just disregard the page entirely. I deleted that entire side of her head, and basically just I viewed that one horn that she already had, the one that I said was okay, that I started with. I sort of viewed it as being like I viewed like a cylinder going through her head and attaching to that one horn, like a straight cylinder. And then I just said, well, it would end here, here would be the circle, and this is where the other horn that looks just like it would come out of. Doing stuff like that requires a large degree of sort of being able to imagine three-dimensional objects in your head, which not everyone has. It's one of those things that I've always had, so it comes to me naturally, and I can't really imagine not being able to do it. But a lot of people don't have that at all, so whenever they... Like, if you ever had one of those aptitude tests, like I think the ASVAB had a few of these, where they give you an object and they tell you, can you imagine this in a different perspective? And I never had any trouble at all with a test like that. Some people do. And it's just one of those things where I can't really imagine it because it's just always been there. But for people that don't have it, things like that must be just a pain in the ass. Must be a giant pain in the ass. So, anyways, yep. Hekapoo, you have been a source of great tribulation. Those back muscles were kind of fun. Actually, what I had to do there... Not many people really realize this, but everyone's muscles are slightly different. So if you look at someone that's a bodybuilder, for example, this is a great example, actually. If you look at someone that's a bodybuilder, and I think I've mentioned this before, if you look at something like their abs, everyone's abs are slightly different. Of course, everyone has the same amount of muscles and everything, but... and it seems like it's the next to... Well, first, how many muscles are there? Six-pack, of course, is the joke. But there's actually another set of muscles that typically rest just below the pectorals that you don't really see. And that would be another set. Plus, there's like another sort of like lesser set that sort of extends to the groin, I think. I'm not sure if that actually is the groin muscle itself, but it's obviously part of the same sort of structure that the rest of the abdominal muscles are a part of. So it's kind of difficult to say whether or not which is which, but all the bodybuilders have a six-pack at least. Some of them have a weird sort of 8-pack, and I guess by that logic, you could also sort of have a 10-pack in a very strange way, but I don't think I've ever really seen that. Because usually that set of muscles does not appear. It's really strange. Anyways, point being, everyone's belly button, I think, sort of intersects usually on the meeting point of the third and second set in a typical six-pack. I think that's the case. It almost always aligns that way. But the way that they sort of, like how long they are, how big the first set are compared to the first two, that sort of thing, it can often be dramatically different between different people. Another example, like I've been getting more in shape lately myself. I exercise, I have always sort of exercised, to some degree at least. More so recently. I don't build muscle particularly well though, because I'm naturally an ectomorph, is what they're called. Also known as a hard gainer. Basically, there are three. I'm really getting on a tangent here. Basically, there are three different sorts of body types. Of course, there's many variations in between, but the three general sort of sets are ectomorph, mesomorphs, and endomorphs. Ectomorphs are the very lean-looking, thin, gangly freaks like myself. Like, one of the reasons why I was a high jumper when I played basketball in high school is just because I was so goddamn light. And I was light because I don't have a thick bone structure. My muscles align in a very specific way. And there's just not much to worry about in regards to getting my body to lift off the ground. It wasn't because I was just a muscular fiend or anything like that. Although I did do a lot of leg training at the time. But I think the highest ever jump, someone said that they could see that my head was level with the rim, and I'm 5'11", I guess. Which is that's not like a huge major thing, but, you know, for just some white boy in the middle of nowhere, I guess that's pretty good. But I'm an ectomorph for, like, that reason. That's sort of how I'm built. It doesn't matter how much I eat, it doesn't matter how much protein I take in, or whatever, like, anything like that. I'm never going to transform myself into Arnold Schwarzenegger for that reason. A mesomorph is sort of your typical body. That's the middle one. Kind of just, most people are mesomorphs, I would say. It's sort of the conventional male body, I would say. Fun fact, actually, ectomorphs, while they have a lot of problems with, like, weight, not like gaining muscle mass, I don't have any problems gaining weight. If I wanted to gain a bunch of fat, I certainly could. But actually gaining muscle mass and keeping my muscle mass on is something that my body is really, really resistant to. It does not like doing that. But I can get in shape with aerobics somewhat easily. Just a weird thing in regards to body types. Endomorphs, on the other hand, are typically like big, like football linebacker sort of guys. People that even if they did nothing but aerobic exercises their whole life and avoided weightlifting entirely, they still would look like big dudes. Like they just can't change their body type. It has nothing to do with actual muscle mass. I've been talking about this so long I can't remember why I brought it up, but something to do with my general health and body types or something. And the way that people's bodies are shaped. Whatever. I'll just go with it. Who cares? But I'm an ectomorph. I, exercise quite a bit. Can't really keep muscle mass too well. I'm one of those, like, I can overload on protein, like, run creatine through my system or whatever, even after doing sets or whatever, repetitions. And I can sort of retain it a little bit, but I'm just sort of one of those people that if I don't do a particular exercise, like if I'm just doing, like, benches or something, and if I don't bench within 2 days or something, all the progress that I just made, it's just gone. Like, my body just shrinks down into nothing. Part of that, of course, is because I'm also doing, I've been doing more biking recently than running. I kind of stopped running because it was really fucking up my legs. So it's more biking now, but if you do anything in regards to... it's not really aerobic, is it? But anything that tries to push your body to convert to anaerobic respiration, for example. Couldn't get her little panty lines just right. I tried several types. Anything that causes that to happen will absolutely destroy your gains. As everyone knows, aerobic exercise do kill gains, so you're really not supposed to do both at the same time. I did briefly try to completely lay off running and biking and anything like that, and do nothing except for try to gain weight and work exclusively on gaining mass. That didn't work out too well. Because even though I was taking a lot of calories, most of it protein, my body was still like, you know what, let's just turn all this into fat. And even though I'm, like, killing my body, trying to lift, I'm, because of my body type, you know, I'm an ectomorph again, I'm a hard gainer, my body just decides, you know what, I'm not going to do that. Fuck you, we're going to keep all this as fat and you're going to like it. So I eventually decided, you know what, this is a fool's errand. I'm just going to concentrate exclusively on trying to just keep myself slim as opposed to trying to make myself into a giant. Actually, my brother got upset, the middle brother. I have 2 brothers. The middle one, I'm the youngest. I was the accident. The pleasant experience. The middle one got obsessed with Arnold Schwarzenegger whenever he was younger, so he's been crazed about building mass ever since. So he's the big guy in the family. He sort of looked like me whenever he was younger, but his body type is also different from mine. You can tell just by looking at him. But I remember the reason why I brought all this up is I'm an ectomorph. I have all these problems. I have to, you know, my body is just very different because everyone's bodies are different. If you take, like, your finger and your thumb and try to wrap it around your wrist, this is a good test. If you can actually meet them together, and especially if you can meet, like, several fingers together, that probably means that you're an ectomorph, because there's not really any muscle there. It's just tendon and bone. It's the one part of your body that you can't make bigger by lifting weights. It's going to remain exactly as it is forever. It's just never going to improve. I have very thin wrists, which sucks real bad because I'm also an artist that sits in front of a computer all the time and also plays games. So I get carpal tunnel really badly, very easily, over pretty much nothing. And considering I also have to draw, it absolutely destroys me. It seems like if you measure around your wrists and divide by your height, I can't remember the rule, you can look it up. It's not that hard to find. Then the closer you are to having a ratio of 1, like 1.00, like it should be higher than that, preferably. But you can actually have it be lower than that. But the closer that you are to 1, the more likelihood you are of being an ectomorph, and the harder time that you're going to have trying to build muscle mass. Just as a general rule. It's not because of your wrist, that's just an easy way of measuring the way that your bone structure is laid out. And if I measure mine, I'm straight 1. Like, I'm right there. I'm a 1 exactly. Which is not good. That's not good at all. So, everyone's bodies are different. And that wrist test is a good way of seeing that. So I was bringing that up because I was talking about the way that muscle structure is laid out. Like the abdominal rule, everything like that. Everyone's bodies are different and laid out in slightly different ways. And to bring it all back around to whatever I was talking about like 20 minutes ago, the reason why I brought all that up is because whenever you're cheating, not everyone's bodies are meant to look exactly the same. So if you are drawing a bodybuilder, or you're drawing a girl or whatever else, and you're looking at a reference image and going, well, I want it to look like this, but I know that their muscles are supposed to line like this because I'm looking at this reference image. That's not how that works. You can cheat, and you can cheat not only because it's an illustration, but also because that's how real life works. Even if you were working with nothing but reality behind you, then you would still have a lot of leverage to work with. You wouldn't have to worry about it that much, because everyone's bodies are different. There's another thing in my head that was rattling around, but I get to talking. Oh, it's hard to keep track. everyone's bodies are different, everyone has different musculatures, blah blah blah. I can't remember. I do that and then I get completely lost because there's just too many things rattling around up there. So yeah, whenever you are laying out your stuff, you don't have to worry too much about that. Most of the groups are fine. I'm starting on my second pass. Whenever I was doing all the line work, that was not my final line work. I was going to go back the entire time and just do what I'm doing here. And whenever I was talking about doing the exterior line work, this was what I was preparing for. I was going to go back and shore up everything by... Like, I've talked in the past about doing drafts and working up. This is part of it. I got the line work done, quote-unquote, but that's just for the second pass to come through, and this is what this is. So if it sort of looks like I'm doing strokes but not really doing anything, it's because it's just cleanup work, basically. What Hekapoo's type is, as far as body types go, I don't know. She's very, very short in the show. She's shorter than the main characters, and they're children. But she's also got, like, this enormous butt. And she's got huge thighs. She has a very strange body type. And even though she's under the dress, she actually does have it, because whenever they show her... By the way, that jump right that happened just then, this is what I was talking about earlier. And the reason why all the colors changed slightly, is because I started work on the coloring stage and got all my shading done, and then realized that Bandicam had not been recording the entire time. I had pressed the button, and apparently it just decided, nah, I'm not gonna do that. Maybe I didn't press the button hard enough, I don't know. Maybe my ectomorph carpal tunnel came through, and it didn't have the strength to do it, I don't know. So, as a result, I did like 2.5 hours of work for nothing, as far as the video goes. I was actually considering, well, I could just jump ahead, because the point of this was just to do line work anyways. But I also started thinking, I didn't like the results of that anyways. If you really want to see the results, you can just go back, 2 minutes or whatever it's been, to whenever that jump happened. And you can see what it looked like if you freeze the frame, I guess. It didn't look too great. I was doing sort of conventional shading. Just doing brush strokes with the normal brush tool. What I decided to do is to instead focus on doing what I'm doing here is binary work. Like, do hard shading. I actually was thinking about what's her name? The lady that does all the stuff for Shantae. I can't remember what her name is. I really love her work, though. I wonder if she's dating anyone. She's probably married. Everyone my age should be married by now. But typically what she does is she does like a straight shading layer, and then sort of a secondary shading layer that goes right under it. That's just barely like it's rim lighting. It's sort of a intermediate between the main color and the dark color, but it's just barely on the ridge of her actual shading layer. Just imagine like a circle. Imagine you're doing what I'm doing here, and it's a binary thing where you can only work with one color. You can't push the color around. You can't blur it. Like what I'm doing here. You can see what I'm doing, where I'm going back over it and then just putting that little rim on the very edge of it, so it's almost exactly the same in every way. You can just see a little bit of it on the sides. That's what she does, and that's what I was trying to do. I was sort of inspired by that. I was thinking about Shantae's shading, because I've always liked that. And I was thinking, well, the line work on this is so heavy, and I was worried so much about the way that that's the problem I was having before with the previous shading layer. That's the reason why I didn't like it, because I was doing sort of conventional, the beginnings of trying to paint realistically. But this illustration has such heavy line work, and this is something I'm still trying to work out, because I've I'm kind of getting to the point where I feel like I'm pretty confident in the way that I'm working my lines now, but I haven't really done too much color using it yet. But I have found that the simpler the color is, with the thicker the line work is, then the better the result happens to be. So, whenever I was applying it this time around, I decided, you know what, I'm not going to paint it. I'm going to go through and have one primary shading layer, and then I'm going to go through and do that sort of secondary, tertiary, whatever you want to call it, shading move right under it. So I'm working with a shading 1 and a shading 2. And that ended up working better. The only thing that it really is a major problem with, and I've always had this problem, and I've always talked about it on the channel, is the skin. Skin is always a huge problem in regards to shading, because I really prefer things to be really dramatic looking, and especially with my form. Like, this is one of the reasons why I like drawing. This is one of the primary reasons why I like drawing sort of not muscly women, but women with sort of like look at her posterior back there, right? Like, that's not, I guess it's muscular, but to me it's like she's not a muscle girl, but she still has defined form, I guess would be the right way of saying it. So I like drawing that. I like being able to draw the body in a way that you can tell how everything works, but it's not so aggressive that it's overworked, and it's not so aggressive that they look unnatural, like overly unnatural. Like it, you know how a big misconception is that women really like big, muscly dudes, which is not the case at all, really. Not that people don't like muscly dudes or anything ever. But you can't get to the point where you're too big, and that actually happens much earlier than most people believe, I think. There's been studies in regards to how women and, like, of course, this... If you're like a guy that's attracted to other guys, then it might be slightly different. I can't speak for that, so I don't know. I can only speak to what I know and what I've seen as far as studies go. But conventional studies between conventional sex partners and things like that. Men are... The thing that women think that men are attracted to is actually way more exaggerated. A very much so exaggerated version of what men are actually attracted to. Like, studies have found that and I can't cite this. It's been years and years and years since I've read up on it. But typically, men like a little bit of pudge, that sort of thing. But whenever you ask women to identify which body type do you think that most men like, they will pick like this almost stick-like figure that most men don't like at all. And the inverse is also true. Like, men will pick this like huge, like jacked up, ripped dude. Like, oh, women like this guy. But usually it's like much further down the line. Like, women actually prefer a guy that's... I've always had it explained to me, and I think of it this way as well, that women prefer a guy that whenever you look at him, you can, like what I'm drawing, like what I prefer to draw, that sort of thing, that you can tell that they have definition. You can tell, like, whenever they move, you can tell how their body is working. Like, you can see the muscles moving in their body. But it's not big. Like, they're not huge or anything like that. And I think the same goes for women as well. That, like, one of the reasons why I like drawing women with this sort of defined form is because, one, as an artist, it's fun to draw form and motion and things like that. And women's bodies are much more associated with curving and not having to abide. Like, if I were to draw like a Dragon Ball character, like Goku or something, he's really stiff. And a lot of that is just Toriyama's style, and also because he's such a giant, muscular guy. And to me, that looks terrible whenever I try to draw it. Because it's really hard to draw them in motion and like doing things without it being really rigid looking. And I don't like to draw things that are really rigid looking. Oh, penis erections. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Drawing women with these sort of divine forms is nice for me because, like, dumb memes aside about perversions or whatever, that actually is really fun to do that because of that reason. Because you get the best of both worlds. You get to draw a form that doesn't have to commit too much to itself, because it's a malleable, feminine-looking form, where it can sort of contort and twist in different ways that's interesting to the eye, and is fun to draw. And you also get the definition that you would want as far as drawing the way that the body works. And especially with my sort of, it's realistic but it's not realistic at all sort of style that I do. Like, obviously this is not realism whatsoever, but it also is sort of stepped inside of it a little bit. This is kind of how I do things. It works really well for that, so. I guess the growing theme of this video has been the lack of the ability to cheat, and the lack of commitment that you have to have in regards to creating, I guess. And also, how shitty our bodies are. But Hekapoo obviously in the show does not quite look like this. One of the things I said on at the end of this is that her skin tone is obviously much more natural looking. Like, she kind of just looks like a caucus girl. She's very pink. Whereas in the show, she's kind of just white. She's a gray color. But using that gray was... I tried it at some points, and I still tried it again at the end, near the end of the video, once I'm done with all the lighting passes I'm doing here. By the way, doing this flame work here, I'm almost done with the picture, but this just took so long to figure this out. Like, I was just trying so many things, trying to get this fire to look sort of natural. I really wanted to have blue fire, but in the end, I work on this a long time. I decided, you know what, it's just causing too many problems because of her skin tone, primarily. Because I was trying to have a backwash glow effect, and have it be blue across her whole body, the front of her body. But it was just causing so many problems that I decided, you know what, I'm just going to convert this over to a yellow flame after all, because it's working with her skin tone. And that's the reason why I decided that her skin tone should just remain as a sort of pinkish color, as opposed to a straight-up desaturated gray color. Because having it be gray was conflicting too much with the palette of the rest of the image, and it also was not picking up the... it wasn't picking up the light as well. Like, having a warm light bouncing off of a very light, sort of mid-tone skin works really well, especially if you're doing dramatic lighting. And I've talked about skin tones in the past and how much of a problem they are for me. A problem in general. Like, if you're doing dark skin tones, like someone that of African descent specifically, or someone, some Middle Eastern people or Indian people as well, conventionally will have this. Islands and things like that as well. Just anyone that has darker skin. It can be a pain trying to draw light like this, especially reflecting, because the natural tone of their skin obviously is going to absorb more light than it would if you're, like, extremely pale. And the flip side is true as well if someone has extremely light skin, like upper Scandinavian sort of area people, I guess, Europeans. My my ancient peoples as well. My Scottish and Irish blood. Because I'm very light as well. Light also does not particularly play too well as far as reflecting and everything goes, because you can run into a similar problem in regards to contrast, where someone with very dark skin doesn't reflect enough, and someone with really light skin is reflecting so much that it ends up creating a washed out image. And you can't really have that much contrast. Like, if you want to draw the seams of, like, someone's arm going into their torso or something, that sort of dark area right there, It has to be a very specific amount of light, or else it looks very unnatural looking, especially if you're doing painting. So someone with very dark skin, that probably would be a little bit easier because they already have dark skin in the first place, so you don't have to worry too much about overshading that. You would have to worry about adding light on top of it, without it being overly dramatic. With someone that has very light skin, you would have the opposite problem, where it's very easy to draw them sort of blending into the background and interacting with the light around them. But making the rest of their form look dramatic and to have the right amount of contrast would similarly have a problem. Because you're having to work against the color of the skin in regards to making their form look natural. Whereas someone that has a mid-tone level of skin, you can work with it much, much easier. In my experience, anyways. As far as doing these sort of illustrations go. So, that's why Hekapoo does not get her precious shale skin that she gets in the show. She has to be a whitey. She's got to be a honky. for that reason. Because it's just a little bit easier to work with. So, that's that story. Okay. I will briefly talk about her character. If you want my general thoughts, I guess you can go back and watch the old video, although that's probably changed. And it seems like I remember I didn't really care too much for the commentary in that one anyways. But my in general thoughts for the show is that a lot of the characters can be obnoxious because the creators themselves are a little bit obnoxious people. Like, they're a little bit immature themselves, so that definitely comes through whenever... It's one of those shows where the kids are the ones doing everything, and they act like yo sort of kids, you know, that sort of shit. And even the adults sort of act that way, and as a result of the kids being the ones that have all the agency in the show, the adults are not allowed to have any competency, so they also act like idiots. And here we go, about done. Hekapoo sort of also acted this way, but I'm not going to go into spoilers, I guess. I'm not going to talk too much about it. But she has really kind of made herself out to be a complete asshole. Like, she's really just not a particularly good person. Hekapoo actually is. She looks good, I like her design, but as far as being a good person goes, no, she is not. She's a very selfish, arrogant person that loves to get her way, apparently doesn't have a high opinion of anyone else, very manipulative. She's very shallow, too. Remember I was talking about body types and how women don't actually usually prefer jacked up, incredibly muscly-looking guys? She does, and that's the only thing she likes. There's even like this weird, like, bird guy who is like really jacked, but he's just dumb as a fucking brick. And she's like, yeah, I just like to have him around, and the show makes it obvious that she likes to have him around because he's like an extremely, like, worked up on steroids looking guy. Just not a particularly great person, Hekapoo. Very shallow, very arrogant, very self-centered. Which I guess is sort of the point of the sort of magical council characters. Is that they're... they're sort of like Jedi. They are self-centered and sort of isolated and insular to the point that that's their flaw. They can't really see past themselves, so... Maybe it's intended, who knows. Alright, so there you go. Hekapoo drawing... she looks alright to me. Made some mistakes. I think the line work turned out okay, but as you can probably see, I didn't actually care too much for the line work until I got through with the color, when I could actually use the overly thick, dramatic line work to my advantage by really working up the contrast in that regards. I think that a lot of images work better as standalone line work images. Some of them will work better as grayscale. A lot of things that I've done will work better if I'm just doing line and cross-hatching or stipling or whatever. But in this case, I think this does work better if it has color associated with it. If it was nothing but grayscale, or if it was nothing but line work, it probably wouldn't work as well. I've always enjoyed really playing with colors. I go back to the sort of purple to red range a whole lot. Those are sort of my colors. And Hekapoo really makes that work. I just had to change your skin tone, that's all. That's all you really need in life, to change your skin tone. Then everything gets better, doesn't it? Oh boy. Oh, this is a bad video. Alright. Hope you guys enjoyed yourselves. Stay tuned for my third video about Hekapoo at some point. She's a good-looking character. And a person, to be fair, just not a very good one. Alright. See you guys next time.